On March 31st, 2019, a hometown hero stepped outside of his own store, and seconds later, 11 bullets rewrote Los Angeles history and changed a whole community and family forever. What really happened to Nipsey Hussle in his final minutes, and why did a quiet warning about snitching explode into murder? We're going to get into the shooting, the manhunt, and the rumors, and by the end of this video, you'll see how a 2-minute exchange turned into a brutal murder and learn about the legacy that he left behind. Welcome to the True Crime Nurse, everybody. My name is Kat, and I'm a registered nurse who loves all things nursing and true crime. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring the bell before you go. All right, friends, let's get into it. Ermias Asghedom, also known as Nipsey Hussle, was a well-known rapper, community icon, and successful businessman. He was born on August 15th, 1985 in the Crenshaw district of L.A. to his parents Angelique and Dwight. He was very close with his parents and his siblings growing up, but sadly, his parents decided to divorce when he was little. When his dad left, his grandmother stepped in to help raise the children, and she was a very significant figure in his life. His father did remain present despite the split, though. Dwight immigrated from Eritrea, Africa, and he took Nipsey and his brother there to visit, and this was an experience that deeply strengthened their connection to their roots. Also, his first name comes from his father's side, and it actually translates to God will rise, which I thought was beautiful. Now, as a child, Nipsey was known for his intelligence and hustle early on, so his parents always felt that he was destined to be successful someday. He excelled academically, and from a very young age, he would shine shoes and sell candy to make his own money. However, after leaving high school, he became involved with a well-known gang in South L.A., and this was a decision that reflected the complex environment that he grew up in, and he openly talked about this in his music and in the media. Despite his tough upbringing, though, he transformed himself into a force for positive change in his community. In the mid-2000s, Nipsey gained recognition through his songs like Bullets Ain't Got No Name and The Marathon. In 2018, he released his debut studio album called Victory Lap, which earned him a Grammy nomination for Best Rap Album of the Year. He was known for his authentic West Coast hip-hop sound and his gift of storytelling, but equally important was his role as an investor, activist, and philanthropist in South L.A. He reinvested a substantial amount of the money that he made back into his own neighborhood. Nipsey opened up the Marathon clothing store in 2017 at the intersection of Crenshaw Boulevard and Slauson Avenue. He also launched a co-working space, a STEM center called Vector 90, and provided funding for improvements like local schools, parks, and to businesses. Hussle's nickname was Neighborhood Nip, and this was fitting because he was known to actually walk through the streets without any security because he felt safe there. Something else that was really important to him was helping convicts who needed a second chance by giving them job opportunities that many others wouldn't. He spent his personal time and money creating jobs and opportunities within his own community, reportedly investing about $2.5 million into the plaza where he opened up his store. His dedication to ending gang violence and improving lives made him a beloved figure in South LA. Nipsey Hussle was at the height of his career and influence as a Grammy-nominated artist, a successful entrepreneur, a father of 2 children, and all with the love of his life by his side, the beautiful actress Lauren London. Although he did so much good in the community, fame came with certain risks, and I don't believe for a second that he thought that he was at risk in his own community. In the early afternoon on Sunday, March 31st, 2019, Nipsey Hussle went to his Marathon clothing store in the strip mall off of Crenshaw Boulevard, and this was an unplanned visit to help out a friend. One of Nipsey's buddies from the old neighborhood, Carrie Lathan, had just been released from prison after serving 25 years. This is a perfect example of the kind of person that Nipsey was. He had given Lathan some new clothes and was meeting him at the store to give him anything else that he may have needed that day. Nipsey spent part of the afternoon signing autographs, taking pictures of fans, and talking to his friends in the parking lot where he should have been safe. He popped in and out of the store all the time, and again, never had security with him because he always felt safe and confident there. At approximately 3 p.m., 29-year-old Eric Holder Jr. arrived at that same parking lot, accompanied by Brianita Nicholson, who had just given him a ride in her car. The two had been seeing each other for a little while, but it wasn't anything serious. They initially pulled in so that Holder could grab food from a place called Master Burger in the strip mall. That's when Nicholson spotted Nipsey Hussle outside of the clothing store, and she got excited because he was a star that she really looked up to. She parked the car, and they both walked over to Nipsey and the small group of people around him. Nipsey said hi to Eric Holder, and he actually recognized him from the neighborhood. According to witness testimonies, this conversation started out casually, and they even shook hands as soon as Eric walked up to him. However, Nipsey brought up a sensitive topic, which was a rumor about snitching. Nipsey said something along the lines of, "Hey, they're saying that you've got some paperwork out on you. You might want to take care of that." According to the investigators, paperwork refers to court documents or possibly informant records, so he was suggesting that Holder was suspected of having cooperated with the police about something. Nipsey's friend Herman Cowboy Douglas, who had overheard this conversation, said that Nipsey's tone wasn't accusatory or loud, it was more of a friendly heads up, advising Holder to address those rumors for his own safety. Holder responded defensively, though. According to Brianita, Holder asked Nipsey something like, "Have you ever snitched?" That conversation lasted only a few minutes and it didn't seem to be escalating. Now, I'm sure that you're thinking that the conversation does seem tense. However, Nipsey actually stopped and posed for a quick selfie with Brianita during this encounter because she asked him for a picture. Now, if Nipsey felt threatened, I personally don't believe that he would stop and take a picture. He'd be keeping an eye on Eric. But Nipsey bringing up these rumors deeply upset and triggered Eric Holder. In gang culture, being branded a snitch can be a grave, even lethal insult, and Holder left that conversation stewing over it. He walked away to pick up the chili cheese fries that he had just ordered and then returned to Brianita Nicholson's car where she was waiting. As they drove off from the strip mall, heading around the block, Holder pulled out a gun. He began loading bullets into the magazine right there in the car. Brianita yelled at Eric and said, "You are not going to do a drive-by in my car," and Holder shockingly put the gun away. Nicholson later testified that she had no idea Holder intended to harm Nipsey until she saw the gun. She thought maybe the two of them had had an argument, but she said that she could not have predicted what was to come. Holder had her stop the car a short distance away, claiming that he'd be right back. He got out, taking not one but two firearms with him, taking a handgun for each hand. Brianita stayed in the driver's seat, completely unaware of his intentions. Around this time, so roughly 3:18 to 3:20, Nipsey Hussle was still in the parking lot chatting with Carrie Lathan, Lathan's nephew, another friend named Shermy Villanueva, as well as a couple of other people. He approached Nipsey and the group without any warning. According to one of the survivors, as Holder walked up, he said something to Nipsey like, "You're through." Then, without any further discussion, Holder opened fire at close range. He fired from both guns, aiming primarily at Nipsey. In total, he fired at least 10 rounds, striking Nipsey from the front and side multiple times. We're going to dive pretty deep into this autopsy report from a nurse's perspective, but he fell to the ground bleeding profusely. Two other men standing near Nipsey, Carrie Lathan and Shermy Villanueva, were also both hit by bullets. Lathan, the former inmate that Nipsey was trying to help, was struck by a bullet in his back that would shatter part of his spine. Villanueva was hit in the abdomen, but his wounds were less severe. The gunfire caused complete and utter chaos. People in the area scattered and ran for cover as soon as the shots rang out. Security camera footage later showed Nipsey, unarmed and in a vulnerable position, being shot and then falling to the ground. Eric Holder was not finished even after Nipsey was down, though. In an act of apparent rage or vindictiveness, Holder walked up to Nipsey and kicked him in the head before running away. This disturbing detail, the kick to the head, was confirmed by surveillance video and became a huge focal point for the prosecutors, who argued that this demonstrated the personal nature of the attack. This was a deliberate and spiteful act by Holder. As Holder sprinted back to the getaway car, Nipsey Hussle was fatally wounded on the pavement. According to later witness statements, Nipsey remained conscious for a moment or two, despite the multiple gunshot wounds. One witness heard Nipsey speak his final words. Nipsey recognized the extent of his injuries and said, "You got me." It's heartbreaking to know that Nipsey knew that the gunman had inflicted fatal injuries and that these were his final moments. Another bystander saw Nipsey trying to move and fight to stay alive. He was breathing, biting his tongue, struggling to even try to get up as his body was failing him, but within seconds, he lost consciousness. Meanwhile, Eric Holder jumped into Brianita Nicholson's car and yelled at her to drive. Nicholson was startled and confused because she heard the gunshots and people screaming, but only realized that something terrible had happened once Holder came back running to the car. When she asked what happened, Holder said, "Drive or he would slap her." Now, fearing for her own safety at this point, Nicholson then sped away from the scene with Holder in the passenger seat. Back at the scene, Nipsey's friends frantically tried to help him. Calls to 911 were made immediately as people gathered around Nipsey's limp body, and they all tried to apply pressure to his wounds. Lathan and Villanueva, both injured, also needed medical attention. Police and paramedics arrived quickly, and the strip mall was officially taped off as a crime scene in the very place that Nipsey built for his community. Nipsey's brother Samuel arrived and found him bleeding on the ground. He watched as the first responders desperately attempted CPR as they rushed him to the back of an ambulance. Nipsey was very close with his siblings, and I cannot imagine how devastating this was for him to see. LA Fire Department paramedics administered aid to Nipsey Hussle and the other victims on scene, then rushed them to a nearby hospital called California Hospital Medical Center. Tragically, Nipsey's injuries were far too severe. He had been shot at least 10 times with bullets piercing through his vital organs. At approximately 3:55 p.m., 33-year-old Nipsey Hussle was pronounced dead at the hospital just 35 minutes after the shooting. Lathan and Villanueva were treated for their wounds and survived. Lathan's injury left him paralyzed and wheelchair-bound, and Villanueva's abdominal wound was stable, so he actually was able to speak with the police pretty quickly afterwards. He said that in the moments after the gunfire, he heard Nipsey's heartbreaking words, he shot me," and said Nipsey was in complete shock. News of the shooting spread almost immediately. Crowds began to gather outside of the Marathon store within hours in total disbelief that Nipsey Hussle, the hometown hero, had been violently attacked in broad daylight. After fleeing the scene in Nicholson's Chevy Cruze, Eric Holder was on the run. Nicholson dropped him off at a relative's house, and she said that she still didn't know what he had just done. Holder told her not to snitch and even tried to convince her that nothing happened. He even called her on the phone later that day to see if he could go crash at her place that night. Brianita refused, but she did agree to meet him the next day to help him get a motel room because she said that she was really scared of him and didn't know what to do. By that night, March 31st, surveillance camera footage of the shooting suspect and the getaway vehicle had already been obtained by the police, and it was already circling in the media. The Los Angeles Police Department had identified Nipsey Hussle's killer as Eric Holder by all the witness accounts and had the video of the evidence up within hours. On the morning of April 1st, LAPD publicly named Eric Holder as the suspect and launched a manhunt, warning the city that this man was armed and dangerous. Brianita Nicholson saw the news on TV showing her car and license plate linked to the murder. She panicked when she pieced everything together. Early on April 1st, Nicholson actually drove straight to the LAPD station to turn herself in as the driver in order to share what she knew. In an almost unbelievable twist, an officer at the desk turned her away, reportedly saying to her, "Don't listen to the news," when she tried to explain that her car was involved. The first officer she encountered completely dismissed her and didn't take her statement. This was a massive failure that later prompted an internal investigation to figure out why on earth a key witness was turned away. Determined to do the right thing, Nicholson then returned later and met with detectives once they realized who she was. She gave a full 5-hour interview explaining all of Holder's actions before and after the shooting in exchange for immunity from the prosecution. In those first 48 hours after Nipsey's death, grief and chaos completely gripped the community while the investigators were making their progress. An autopsy was conducted on Nipsey Hussle's body on April 1st, the day after his death, by the Los Angeles County Department coroner. Now, get comfy because we're going to be going over this pretty extensively. Nipsey was shot 11 times in total. The location of Nipsey's wounds included on his head and scalp, right side of his torso and chest, heart, abdomen, multiple parts of his extremities like his arm, elbow, big toe, and one bullet even severed his spine. The head wound was particularly devastating though. A bullet penetrated through his skull, entering near his right temple, and this was the injury listed as the primary cause of death. This caused a catastrophic traumatic brain injury and severe intracranial damage. From a clinical standpoint, a high-velocity gunshot through the brain tissue causes immediate neural disruption, essentially destroying neurons and critical brain structures in its path. This would result in a near-instant loss of consciousness. By the time the first responders had reached him, Hussle showed no signs of responsiveness or any brain activity. The autopsy also documented the extent of his internal injuries and bleeding. Nipsey sustained multiple gunshot wounds to the torso, which produced critical internal injuries. He had punctures in his lungs in 3 separate places. The paths of these bullets lacerated through the lung tissue, and a gunshot through the chest can cause what's called a tension pneumothorax or hemothorax. A hemothorax is basically when the lung collapses and fills the pleural cavity or your chest with blood, making it so that you can't breathe. In Hustle's case, the exam found, quote, over a liter of blood, end quote, pulled inside of his chest cavity, which is just a clear sign of massive internal hemorrhaging in the thorax. For a little context, an adult's total blood volume is around 5 liters for a male of his size, so losing more than a liter into the chest alone would severely compromise circulation and make it impossible to breathe. Perhaps the most devastating torso wound, though, was a gunshot to his abdomen that went through his spine. According to the medical examiner, a bullet entered the right side of his abdomen and pierced through his liver, and then it completely severed his spinal cord. The moment that this bullet hit, Hussle collapsed because that shot would have ceased all function to his legs immediately. The liver is a highly vascular organ, so when a bullet injures the liver, it also causes profuse internal bleeding. This injury alone could cause rapid exsanguination or fatal blood loss into the abdominal cavity. Let me know down below if you remember that term from the Selena video. A substantial amount of Nipsey's blood volume also hemorrhaged internally around the liver. So, the combination of the bleeding in the chest, which again was over a liter, and the additional bleeding in the abdomen would have caused dangerously low blood pressure due to that blood loss. Without any blood in the vascular system to move around or any blood pressure, the heart cannot beat. Even if this happened right outside of a level 1 trauma center with the best surgeons, saving someone with these extensive injuries would be highly unlikely. So Nipsey's chances of survival were virtually zero by the time the paramedics arrived. A toxicology screening was also done as part of the autopsy, and it revealed that Nipsey Hussle had THC in his system as well as codeine and promethazine. These medications can be used in combination with alcohol to make a drink known as lean. I'm sure that most of you have heard of that though. This means that Nipsey may have been taking cough syrup or that he was drinking lean before his death. However, this played no role whatsoever in him passing away. These were simply incidental findings from the coroner. Dr. Nguyen concluded that the cause of death was multiple gunshot wounds to the head and torso, and the manner of death was obviously homicide. Now let's get back into the investigation. Law enforcement worked rapidly to track down Nipsey's killer, and by April 2nd, the LAPD had zeroed in on Eric Holder's whereabouts thanks to a tip. It turned out that Holder had fled over 20 miles away to the city of Bellflower, California in Los Angeles County. Holder actually tried to check himself into a mental health facility in Bellflower on April 2nd, possibly to hide out or to claim some need for psychiatric help, but someone recognized him from the news and immediately called 911. Around 1 o'clock on April 2nd, Los Angeles County Sheriff's deputies responded and they found Eric Holder in the 9000 block of Artesia Boulevard right outside of that mental health facility. Eric Holder was arrested and the deputies handed him over to the LAPD, who confirmed his identity and took him into custody that same afternoon. I think it's important to know a little bit of background information on Holder just for some context. So, Eric Holder was 29 years old at the time of his arrest. He came from the very same neighborhood and social circles as Nipsey, and he was in the same gang in South L.A., meaning they knew each other in multiple ways prior to this event. Holder also dreamed of becoming a rapper someday, but his rap lyrics were disturbingly prophetic. He rapped about body bags, 38 gun blasts, and bloody homicides in his songs, and prosecutors definitely pointed that out. Holder also had a criminal record. Court records show that in 2009, he was arrested and charged with domestic battery against the mother of his child, and for that, he completed an anger management program. In 2012, Holder was arrested for carrying a loaded firearm, and he was convicted and served about 6 months in jail for that. As a result, he was banned from possessing firearms, after which, knowing what we know now, he obviously violated that. Eric Holder's life seemed troubled and directionless by early 2019. He was unemployed and had been drifting, and he had just met Brianita Nicholson just a few weeks earlier. Not much else is known about his upbringing or personal life, though, but his defense team later alluded to struggles with mental health and a family tragedy that left him feeling depressed and somehow tied to his actions that day. No insanity or mental incompetence defense was pursued in court, and a judge actually forbid a psychologist from testifying in his trial. Once he was arrested, it ended a 2-day citywide search and brought a small sense of relief in the community and his family. The suspect was held on a $7 million bail and placed in solitary confinement for his own protection in jail. Authorities were well aware that harming Nipsey Hussle had made Holder a huge target behind bars. The police kept him separate from general population out of fear that some of these other inmates might attack him if given the opportunity. So, from the beginning, The motive for Nipsey Hussle's murder was clearly personal. LAPD Chief Michael Moore publicly confirmed this, and this also aligned with what witnesses mentioned regarding the snitching conversation. Physical evidence from the scene supported all the eyewitness accounts of exactly what happened. Police recovered shell casings and bullets from 2 different firearms on site, confirming that Holder had used 2 separate guns during the shooting. Surveillance videos from the strip mall's security cameras captured the shooting, clearly showing Holder approaching Nipsey, opening fire repeatedly, and even kicking Nipsey after he fell. These videos left no doubt about the gunman's identity when the trial later began, because Eric Holder was plainly visible as the shooter in multiple angles of the footage. Brianita Nicholson's testimony answered a lot of questions that many people had. She talked about Holder's behavior, including loading the gun in her car, his demand that she drive around so that he could return on foot, and his frantic escape after he fired the gunshots. She even provided the detail that Holder initially hinted at doing a drive-by, which she specifically objected to, and he completely disregarded that. Within 2 days of the murder, police also interviewed Herman Cowboy Douglas, Nipsey's close friend, who was also on scene. Cowboy corroborated that Nipsey's conversation with Holder was brief and not argumentative, reinforcing the fact that Nipsey was actually looking out for Holder by suggesting that he clear his own name, if the snitching gossip wasn't true. Cowboy was inside the shop grabbing food when the shots rang out, but he ran outside in time to see Nipsey on the ground and Holder running away. He described Nipsey fighting to stay alive in those final moments, and it was very emotional for him in court. The third victim, Shermy Villanueva, told investigators that after he was shot, he heard Nipsey say, he shot me," as Holder was running away, meaning Nipsey identified his shooter in those final moments. Now, before we get too deep into the trial, I want to talk about some of the theories that have been floated around online during that time. Nipsey was not only a respected artist, but also someone involved in projects that made him a huge target of rumor mills. One widely circulated conspiracy was that Nipsey Hussle was assassinated because he was working on a documentary about Dr. Sebi, and this doctor is an herbalist who claimed to have the cure for AIDS. So many people believed that he was actually silenced by the pharmaceutical companies. Within hours of Nipsey's death, social media posts connected dots with no evidence, implying that the powers that be had Nipsey killed to stop him from exposing secrets in the Dr. Sebi film. This theory gained tons of traction, so much so that the mainstream media debunked it, pointing out that there was no evidence whatsoever to support this. In fact, the Los Angeles police quickly said that Nipsey's murder was a result of a personal conflict with someone from his own community, and Dr. Sebi's own family said that this was baseless and that Nipsey's death was being misused to perpetuate narratives. Let me know in the comments down below if you've actually heard about this, because I remember hearing this rumor spreading in the media at that time. There was also some input by gang interventionists and community members. Some saw Nipsey's death as ironic because here was a man who survived being in a gang and was actively uplifting his community, only to be killed by someone from there. In response, local gang leaders actually organized peace talks and marches in Nipsey's honor. Within days, members of both the Crips and Bloods that had feuded for many, many years stood together for a walk in L.A. in order to mourn Nipsey, and that is unheard of. This happened on April 5th, 2019, when dozens of gang members marched from Nipsey's store through the streets calling for an end to gang violence. And something that I found really interesting that also circulated online was that Nipsey's death spawned some symbolic conversations. Many people talked about the fact that he died at age 33, which is the same age that Jesus died in the Bible, in the very place that he was trying to save. All right, now let's go back to the legal proceedings. So on April 4th, just days after Holder's arrest, he appeared in court for the first time and was formally charged with 1 count of first-degree murder for killing Nipsey Hussle, 2 counts of attempted murder for the gunshots to Lathan and Villanueva, 2 counts of an assault with a deadly weapon, and 1 count of felon in possession of a firearm. After being indicted in May of 2019, Eric Holder Jr.'s case moved slowly towards trial after multiple delays, including the pandemic. Initially represented by Christopher Darden, who actually represented O.J. Simpson, Holder later switched to a man named Aaron Jansen because Darden withdrew after receiving countless public death threats. I've always wondered if this happened to defense attorneys often, but with this new attorney, Holder pleaded not guilty to all charges. His defense unsuccessfully attempted to dismiss the attempted murder counts against 2 witnesses and explored a full mental health defense. But again, the judge ruled that Holder's psychiatric history was completely irrelevant to what happened. When the trial began in June of 2022, prosecutors argued that Holder deliberately murdered rapper Nipsey Hussle after feeling disrespected when Nipsey accused him of being a snitch. They described Holder leaving to arm himself with the two guns, returning to shoot Nipsey multiple times, then kicking him in the head. The defense agreed that Holder was the shooter, but claimed that it was a heat of passion crime triggered by humiliation, seeking a manslaughter conviction instead. Over the span of 2 weeks, jurors heard from key witnesses, including Brianita Nicholson, who talked about driving him to the scene completely unaware of what he would do. Nipsey's friend Herman Cowboy Douglas described Nipsey as he faded in and out of consciousness, and surviving victim Carrie Lathan recalled hearing Holder say, "You're through," before pulling the trigger. The medical examiner also testified that 10 gunshot wounds fatally damaged Nipsey's vital organs. Holder's defense presented hardly any evidence and was completely overshadowed by the prosecution. In July of 2022, jurors found him guilty of first-degree murder, 2 counts of attempted voluntary manslaughter, and firearm charges. In February 2023, Holder was sentenced to 60 years to life in prison, 25 years to life for murder, 25 more for using a firearm, and 10 for the attempted manslaughter convictions. During sentencing, Cowboy Douglas delivered a heartfelt statement about Nipsey's impact and the community's deep loss. Holder remained completely expressionless and offered zero remorse or apologies to anyone, not even his children or partner. In the days following trial, thousands of people flocked to the parking lot of the Marathon clothing store to pay their respects. A makeshift memorial was assembled with hundreds of candles, flowers, notes, balloons, and murals. Fans cried and played his music and chanted, "Long live Nipsey." The intersection of Crenshaw and Slauson became a heartbreaking place, drawing in visitors from all over the world who had been touched by Nipsey's music. Just a little over a week after his death, the Los Angeles City Council announced that the intersection of Crenshaw Boulevard and West Slauson Avenue, which again, it's right by the store, would be renamed Nipsey Hussle Square. There was actually a petition made by community members to make this dedication, and it gathered over 500,000 signatures overnight. By early 2020, the new street signs went up marking it Nipsey Hussle Square, making his name a literal part of the city's legacy. Around the same time, artists and fans were honoring Nipsey the way that they knew best, through his art and his music. Within a month of his passing, more than 50 murals of Nipsey were painted all across Los Angeles. These murals showed Nipsey with angel wings, grinning, and as a guardian over the city. On April 11, 2019, a massive celebration of life service was actually held for Nipsey at the Staples Center in downtown LA. More than 21,000 people attended, and to give you some perspective, something like this has only been done previously for people like Michael Jackson. Tickets were given out for free, and they were gone within minutes. The ceremony was beautiful and featured eulogies by Nipsey's family and friends, and Lauren London delivered a tearful speech reading a text that she had once sent Nipsey, thanking him for making her into the best version of herself. Snoop Dogg spoke at length about mentoring Nipsey and how Nipsey then became a mentor to others, calling him a peace advocate. A letter from Barack Obama was read in which Obama praised Nipsey's community work and mentioned how even his own daughters loved Nipsey's music. Stevie Wonder performed Rocket Love and Tears in Heaven in Nipsey's honor, and the moving service also included a 25-mile funeral procession all through South L.A., passing by important places like his childhood home and the Marathon store one final time. Tens of thousands of people lined the streets, waving Eritrean flags and blue bandanas in show of respect. Crips, Bloods, police officers, celebrities, and everyday fans all stood together, and I feel like that's just such a powerful message to take from today's story. It was one of the largest funeral turnouts ever in Los Angeles. The impact of Nipsey's death was also felt in the LAPD. It came out that Nipsey had actually been scheduled to meet with the LAPD police commissioner the day after he was killed to discuss ways to combat gang violence and help children. The timing was haunting, and the LAPD said that they were dedicated to continue the work that Nipsey had already started. Nipsey's brother Samuel took over the operations for the Marathon clothing store, and the physical store itself in that strip mall ended up closing down after Nipsey's death because it just became too much of a shrine and honestly somewhat unsafe for crowds. But the business continues to live on through online sales. Samuel also pushed forward with plans that Nipsey had, including buying the whole strip mall so that they could turn it into a mixed-use community asset. In 2021, it was announced that the property would be turned into Nipsey Hussle Tower, and this is such a creative way to honor his brother. We can't talk about Nipsey's legacy without mentioning the phrase, "the marathon continues." This was Nipsey's mantra in life because it symbolized endurance, resilience, and staying committed to goals despite hardships. Finally, it's important to remember Nipsey as a father, partner, and family man. He left behind a daughter, Imani, from a previous relationship, and a son, Cross, with Lauren London. Lauren London, in interviews since, has spoken out about keeping Nipsey's memory alive for their son, and she hasn't ever moved on since losing her soulmate. She's also become an advocate for trauma healing and an ambassador for Puma in collaborations that continue to honor Nipsey. Puma, which Nipsey actually had a partnership with, released a co-branded Marathon Clothing X Puma collection after his death, with the proceeds helping fund a neighborhood foundation that Nipsey started. Lauren's also said that March is a very hard month for her and she feels like she's holding her breath. But through her grief, she's been uplifted by how much the world continues to show love for Nipsey, even all these years later. In 2019, BET's awards and the NAACP awards both gave Nipsey special awards for his humanitarian efforts. At the BET Awards, his family accepted the humanitarian award on his behalf, and the audience gave a standing ovation as a video montage played of all the work he was doing in his community. The Grammys actually included Nipsey in the 2020 In Memory segment and dedicated the rap performances that day to him. The phrase, "the marathon continues," appeared on the Jumbotron at Los Angeles' sports games that week, and athletes like LeBron James actually wore Nipsey's t-shirts during warm-ups. Several charitable foundations were also set up. For instance, Nipsey's family established the Neighborhood Nip Foundation to continue his community-centered dreams, focusing primarily on the youth. So, Nipsey Hussle's story is a mix of inspiration and tragedy. He rose from a difficult environment and refused to abandon that very same environment that he found success in. Instead, he invested in it and showed his entrepreneurship and love for where he came from. His murder at the hands of someone from that very place is an awful reminder of the cycles of violence that he was trying to break. With Eric Holder in prison for life, this brought some justice, but it can't bring Nipsey back. So, the marathon for his work continues. Nipsey once said, quote, "If they kill me, I want people to ride for me the right way in unity," end quote. Even in death, Nipsey Hussle continues to unite and inspire people, and the marathon continues. Tokyo Cali Love, thank you so much for today's case recommendation. As soon as I saw your comment, I knew that I had to cover Nipsey's case. Let me know what you guys thought of this story and what you think about famous cases in general. Also, I want your input on something. I've been thinking about covering the death of Michael Jackson because I've seen quite a bit of misinformation out there regarding the medication that he was taking at the time, and that doctor was convicted. So in my opinion, it does fall under true crime. But let me know if that's something you'd be interested in seeing because it would be a very nursing heavy video. Also, let me know your thoughts on Christmas related videos because I just heard about a case that was so shocking and I actually haven't heard anyone cover it. Don't forget to drop me a blue butterfly in the chat for a secret handshake, and please have an amazing week this week. Nurse's orders. I'll see you next weekend. Bye.